So you've already done a basic staple-bound book for your Do Now journal, but for your sketchbook, we're going to do a traditional Japanese bookbinding stitch. And so this is a more archival, traditional way to do bookbinding. So this is essentially what your final product is going to look like. So it has stitching on the side. It is the same on both sides as well. So front, back should look exactly the same, and that's how you know that you did your stitching correctly. So your first step is that you're going to just grab a piece of paper. I'm just using a random scrap paper at my house. And this is how you're going to actually make a ruler to measure your stitches so you know that they're evenly spaced. And this is important because if they're not evenly spaced, the stitching is not going to be as strong as if it's evenly distributed. So how to make a ruler to measure your stitches is you're first going to take your piece of regular plain printer paper and you're going to fold it in half. You always want to make sure that you line up your corners. So how I usually do that is I hold it up, I fold it in half so that it's still loose. And then after my corners are lined up on both sides, I hold it down on the table and keeping my fingers on the edge here, I use my thumbs to crease along. So that way these fingers are holding it straight so it doesn't shift while you're folding it and then not be aligned. So I folded it once in half, hot dog style. Then I'm going to fold it in half again, hot dog style. So at this point I folded it twice. Then I'm going to fold it in half one more time. So I folded it 3 times. Each time I fold it, I'm folding it in half. Next, you're going to unfold the whole thing. So it should look like this, and you should count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 sections. So you should have 8 even sections in your paper. Next, you're going to take your pencil and you're going to draw about 1 inch in. So it doesn't have to be perfect. I'm just going to go about an inch in. Put this back so you can see it. About an inch in, and right on the first crease, I'm just going to draw a dot. Then I'm going to skip a crease and my next crease here. So I skipped one, so it's 2 sections. I'm going to draw another circle, again about 1 inch inward. I'm going to skip a crease and draw another circle about 1 inch in. I'm going to skip a crease and draw another circle about 1 inch in. So it should look about like this. So you can see that the circles around the creases, they're about 1 inch in from the bottom of the page, and there's a little dot every other crease. So this is going to be your guide. It's going to be your ruler, so you know exactly how your pages are going to line up. It'll make sense in a second. So I want you all to do this first, and then when everybody has their guide set, we'll go on to the next part. Okay, so now is when you get into actually dealing with the materials you're going to use for the book. So you are going to count out 25 regular white pieces of paper. So this is about 25. And then I don't happen to have the cardstock at home, so just to show you the difference between what the cover looks like and what the inside pages look like, I'm just going to be using a blue paper. But for you, you're going to have 25 pages of white paper, regular old printer paper. And then you will have 2 pieces of cardstock or thick paper, and these will be your front and back covers. So please go ahead and count out your 25 pages of printer paper, and then grab your 2 pieces of thick cardstock paper. So please do that now. Okay. So now you're going to count out 5 pieces from your stack of white paper. So I have 5 pieces here. And this is where your little guideline ruler page comes in. So this is going to be how you know that you're lining up your holes on every page correctly. So I'm going to use my folded paper, line it up, make sure that all the corners are perfectly lined up, like so. And then you're going to need to use an awl. So this is called an awl, and it's used to punch holes in things. They're really handy. I use them all the time for a lot of different things. They're sharp, so you need to be careful with them. So this is how you're going to punch holes in your paper. So I'm going to take my awl and my 5 sheets of paper with my guide on it, and I'm going to gently press down in the middle of the hole on each of the 4 dots that I drew on my guideline paper. I'm going to keep my hand here holding the sheets together so I know that nothing is shifting. I'm going to go back over them just to make sure that they're punched well. And then these holes are pretty small, and if you really look at the awl, it has a really thin pointed tip, and then it gets thicker as it goes on. So how to open up the holes a little wider is I'm going to always have it pushing away from you so don't slip. I'm going to go from the back, and I'm going to push it all the way through like this on all 4 of the holes I just punched. That way when I go to use the needle, I don't have to shove through the paper really hard. Then I have my first set of pages that have the holes punched in them. So I'm going to do this until I go through all of my sheets of the book paper. And if you don't want to use this anymore, you are also welcome to use the holes that you had already punched. It might be easier. I think it's easier to do it using the holes that I already punched because the paper is flat and not folded. So it's going to be the same thing of press it through. Like this. And then again, going back through on the front side. Oop, I have a little too much paper here with my old sheets. So I'm going to remove my guideline sheets. I'm going to press through. Again, always going away from you, so that way you don't accidentally slip and stab yourself. And one thing that I forgot to mention, that I hope I say to you before I start this video in class, is that you need to be doing all of this on either a cutting mat that looks like this, or a piece of cardboard. You'll most likely have cardboard because I don't have enough cutting mats yet for everybody. So the cutting mats are used to make sure that you have a soft surface to kind of punch into when you're using these tools, because if you don't, you are going to not only kind of carve into the table with the awl or the pointy tool that you're using to punch your holes, but the table is also a really slippery surface. So if you press down through your paper and the awl goes into the table, it could potentially slip along the surface of the table and you could get hurt. So it's always good practice to be using a soft surface to go into whenever you're using a cutting tool or a tool like this, so that way it keeps you safe and it also keeps the surface of the table safe. So bear with me, I'm going to do the next stack as well. And so now I want you to do this with your whole stack of paper and then we can move on to the next section. So after you get your paper done, your regular old printer paper, that's going to be kind of the meat of your sketchbook. You then want to make sure you do your covers. So it's going to be the same thing where you take your drawing paper, your paper that's going to be in the middle of your sketchbook, make sure it's all lined up in 4 corners, and press the all through. So again, please do this before we move on to add the actual sewing part. The sewing part is going to be a little tricky, so please make sure that you are fully paying attention to the next section. Okay, so now I have all of my pages are punched. I'm going to make sure they're lined up nice. And one thing that you'll notice is that when you are using the awl to punch the holes in the paper, you can see that the paper is kind of sticking up where the hole is. So you want to make sure that that inside part is on the inside of the cover. So I'm going to flip it over so that way the outside is really nice, and same with the back. So I'm going to have all my pages lined up. They have the holes through them, and now we're ready to sew. So what you need in order to do the sewing part of it, so if we're looking back at my already done one, it's stitched up and down the whole front. You need to first take one of the needles. So again, these are really sharp, so please be careful with them. You need to go and get a length of waxed thread, and how much you need is about an arm's length, or actually really both arms. So I'm going to hold the spool of the waxed thread. It might be a little hard to see, but I'm actually holding it in one hand as far as my arms will go wide, and holding the spool in the other hand. And so after I measure about a wingspan or both your arms across your body, I'm just going to grab the scissors and cut my length. I'm just going to put the thread back so that way the next person can use it. Then I'm going to carefully thread the needle. And you want to have about 6 or 8 inches of extra thread on the back of your needle, just so that way it doesn't pull through. Okay, and now for the tricky part of actually